So beginning in this unit, we're going to start talking about ratios and rates. And for that matter, we're going to be talking about proportions. So what we want to do today is really start laying the foundation by most specifically talking about or reviewing what a ratio is. So it's probably best if we come up with a definition for that. So a ratio is a comparison. So a comparison of two quantities, and by that we mean by two amounts. And this is kind of the trick to this, and we'll understand this later. So it's a comparison of two quantities with related units. So what I mean by that is if we can compare things that have related units, say feet and inches, those are related because they're both units of measurement for distance or length. So we could put a ratio together with those versus something that does not have related units like miles and hours. That would not be a ratio. That will be something that we'll talk about later down the road, more specifically called a rate. So this is really a key. It's a comparison of two quantities with related units. So if you see a definition, that's the word that you're looking for to make sure that we're talking about a ratio. Now, you've probably seen in the past that ratios can be written in any of three forms. So we could be more specific about that. So three forms. So if I'm talking about the ratio of, I don't know, your eyes to your nose. And we'll consider those related because they're both on your face. We know that there's two eyes and one nose. So the way we typically see it is in terms of a fraction. The other way we could see that is using a colon. So instead we could say it's 2 with a colon 1. 2 to 1 is the way we read that. And likewise, that's the way we read it in fraction form. It looks like a fraction, but the fraction bar is going to take on the word 2. Okay? So that's like saying 2 to 1. And the colon, likewise, is going to take on, like we're saying, the word 2. 2 to 1. So when we get to the third option, that actually uses that word 2 to 1. All right, so those are your three ways in which you can write a ratio. The most common way is probably in fraction form because it allows us to more mathematically compare ratios to each other. So our default is typically going to be in fraction form. So as a result, when it is possible, we want to make sure, just as we can view a ratio in fraction form, we can treat it in a fraction. So if we can, we want to make sure to reduce. Okay, so you can see 2 to 1 is already reduced, but let's say it was 4 to 2. I could reduce that down to 2 to 1. So if we're writing it whether we're writing in a fraction form or with the colon or with the word 2, you're going to give a ratio the same treatment as you do a fraction. So if at all possible, you will always reduce down. Okay? So ratios should not be anything that are new to you. I know you've done practice in past years with them with your other teachers. So let's just do some quick and simple practice. In the example above, it says a basket of fruit contains 6 apples, 4 bananas, and 3 oranges. And it says write a ratio in all three forms based on specifically what's being asked. So to start with, it's asking us to do bananas to apples. So by the way, when you're writing in fraction form and you see something written out, in this case, bananas to apples, the first thing that's mentioned when you write in fraction form is always going to be the top number. And the second thing you see is always going to be the bottom number. And if you write it in the other two forms, it's more natural. The first thing, the bananas, will be the first value you see before the colon, the apples being the second thing after the colon, or the bananas being the first quantity you see before the word to, T-O, and the apples, the quantity, the thing you see after the word to. So in the first example, we'll go in order, first doing it in fraction form, then with the colon, then with the word to, and we'll reduce as needed. So it says bananas, we just take how many there are, 4. Let's see, 2 apples, 4 to 6. So just as a setup above, we take a look to see if we can reduce. And well, if we saw 4 to 6 as a fraction, we know 4 6 reduces. We could divide each by a factor of 2, and we would get 2 to 3. So now that I have it in fraction form, it's quick and easy to write it in the other two forms because I want to write all forms in the most reduced manner. So the second way with the colon would be 2 with the colon 3. That is also read as 2 to 3 for the ratio of bananas to apples. And then the third way is with the word to. 2, T-O, 3. So those are the 3 ways that we could write that ratio of bananas to apples. So the next one is a little trickier because it says bananas and apples to oranges. So the and implies that we're going to add. So we're going to add these two together, and then we're going to compare them to the quantity of oranges. So we already know we have 4 bananas, we have 6 apples, and we're going to compare those to the number of oranges, 3. So what do we get when we add the bananas and the oranges? I'm sorry, the bananas and the apples together. We get 10 total bananas and oranges together. I'm sorry, bananas and apples together to 3 oranges. Take a quick look to see if we can reduce them. We can't. And I should point out, you notice this is an improper fraction. Because this is a comparison of quantities, we want to see what those quantities are, even in reduced form. So we'll never take this improper fraction that we're looking at and turn it into a mixed number. So this is our final answer, 10 to 3. So we can write it in with the colon, 10 to 3, and then with the word to, 10 to 3. Okay. So we'll do one more. This time we're going to look at the number of oranges, 3. But this time we have to look at the total fruit. So let's see, the total was made up of 6 apples and 4 bananas and 3 oranges. So the total of oranges in relation to the entire basket of fruit is 3 to 13. Take a look to see if you can reduce it, and you can't. So now we're ready to write it just in the other 2 recognizable forms, with the colon and with the word to. Okay, so those are the quick answers for writing ratios, checking to see if we can reduce in all 3 forms. Okay, so let's do one more, and actually I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to give you a chance to answer the next series of questions on your own, based on the fact that in class we have 24 students, or in one of my classes we have 24 students, and 15 of those are girls. And again, it asks you to write in all 3 forms. So go ahead and give it a shot and then check in. So pause the video and then check in to see what the answers are afterwards. All right, so back to check in, you can see that the answers for the total students to girls reduced is 8 to 5, written in all 3 forms. And the one for girls to boys is a little bit trickier. Well, not necessarily trickier, but it does require a quick calculation because we know the girls are 15. The boys is going to be whatever the total students is, 24 minus the girls. So that's going to give us 9 total boys. So 15 to 9 reduces 5 to 3 in all 3 forms. The last thing that I want to point out is, again, if we consider ratios as fractions, we can compare them as such. And if needed, to make it easier to compare, we can use common denominators. So as an example, if I had a ratio, say, of 3 to 16, and I want to compare to, we'll say, 7 to 32, we could look at both of these with common denominators. So we want to think about the least common denominator. Remember, that's just like the least common multiple of the denominator. So we should recognize that 16 goes into 32 evenly. So we should be able to look at 3/16 as some number of 32nds, right? So we should recognize that 16 times 2 gives me 32. So 3 times 2 gives me 6. So if I'm comparing 3 to 16 to 7 to 32, it's really like comparing 6 to 32 to 7 to 32. And then we can make the decision of which one is the bigger ratio because we're comparing them with common denominators, in this case to 32nds. So that's another thing that I just want you to be aware of as we continue our review and investigation and practice of ratios when we get back to class. So there's a Google form that I want you to answer to ensure that you got all the necessary content out of the video, and we'll come back to class and do some practice tomorrow.